Welcome back, everyone. No matter where you are, no matter what time it may be, I hope y'all are doing well out there. Tonight's journey takes us deep into some of the most mysterious and protected places in America, our national parks. Millions of acres of untouched land, where the trees will swallow the sound and the mountains hold more secrets than any of us will ever know. Now, most people visit to hike, camp, and take in the beauty. But for a few, those same trails and forests become something else entirely. Places where the rules of reality and nature just don't seem to apply. Over the years, stories have surfaced: missing hikers, unexplainable noises, dark figures seen just beyond the light of a fire. Rangers and volunteers talk in hushed tones about things they've seen but can't put into reports. Tonight we're going to hear from some of them. 5 people, 5 different parks, and 5 encounters that might just change how you see the wild forever. If you've had an encounter of your own and would like to share it here on the channel, be sure and reach out to me. Send me an email. I'd love to hear from you. My email address will be linked in the description below this video. Now, lock in, and let's begin. Everyone grab a drink, lock your doors and windows, hit the lights, and let's get started. Hello, Real Adventures. I'll start by saying I've spent more nights camping than I can count, mostly in the Smokies. I grew up in Sevier County, Tennessee, right outside the park, and the woods have always felt more like a home to me. I know the trails, the animals, and the way the forest sounds when it's just alive and breathing. That's why what happened last May still doesn't make sense. It was spring, and the fog was hugging the valleys until around noon. I'd taken a 3-day solo hike up towards Alum Cave Bluff. I do it every year. Nothing crazy, just a pack and small tent, and the peace that comes from being away from everyone else. The first 2 days were absolutely perfect. No rain, not too many people on the trails, and I even had a bear wander near my campsite the second night. That kind of stuff doesn't bother me. You make some noise and it moves along. The third morning, I started heading back down. I left before sunrise, hoping to beat the incoming rain. That's when I noticed something was a bit off. You know how forest sounds can travel? Birds, bugs, even the echo of your own footsteps. It's almost rhythmic. But that morning, everything around me felt late somehow, delayed. Every sound was delayed about a half a second. I'd step on a stick and then hear another crack just behind it. The same sound, but slightly offbeat. I stopped twice, thinking maybe it was an echo bouncing off the bluff wall. But the timing just didn't fit. I'd walk 10 steps, hear 10 faint steps after. I've hiked long enough to know when an animal's pacing me. This wasn't that. It was matching my gait perfectly. I did the same thing anyone else would do in this situation to deal with my uneasy feelings. I tried to tell myself it was nothing. I turned my phone camera backward for a second, recording behind me just to prove I was overreacting. When I checked it later, all it picked up was trees. I saw no movement. There was nothing there. By the time I reached the turnoff for Arch Rock, the sky was starting to dim again from the rain rolling in. I was maybe a mile from my car when the woods went completely dead. There was no wind. I stopped, thinking I'd imagined it. That's when I heard something breathing. It wasn't close when I first heard it, but it was deep, and it was heavy, and it was coming from higher up the slope. I remember holding my breath, waiting, trying to convince myself it was a bear. But bears don't sound like that. They don't sound like they're trying not to be heard. Then I caught something moving up ahead, something really big, and it looked to be walking upright. It was gliding between the trees. I only saw it in quick flashes. The height of this creature was the first thing to stand out to me. This thing it had to be every bit of 7 feet. Shoulders like a linebacker. It was moving in that smooth, controlled way a person does when they're focused on staying quiet. Everything inside me, my very soul, screamed, "You better not run." So I didn't. I just kept walking at a steady, leisurely pace, pretending I hadn't even seen anything. My heart was hammering so bad that it actually hurt my chest. I could feel that thing pacing me, watching me. It was maybe 30 or 40 yards back now, just far enough that I couldn't see it, but could feel it. The next sound is what broke my brain. There were 2 rocks being smacked together, once, then again, then it would pause. I've heard that sound before. Hikers use it to signal, but this was intentional, patterned, almost curious. I sped up. The sound stopped. A minute later it started again, a lot closer to me this time. By the time I hit the last turn toward the parking area, I was practically speed walking. I could see my truck through the trees, and for the first time all day the forest sounded normal again. Birds, rain, wind, whatever was there had stopped following me. I did make it to my truck, and it was now pouring rain. And no, this wasn't a Bigfoot for anyone listening. I forgot in my state of mind while typing this to mention that when it was going through the trees, I did see a very long snout, and I could clearly see 2 pointed ears on top of the head. This was definitely not a Sasquatch. That night, I played back the video I'd taken earlier, the one that was behind me. I was just hoping for anything, now that I could go over it a lot closer. I was hoping to see a shadow, a sound, something, anything. Nothing. But here's the weird part. The timestamp on the clip was 3 minutes later than when I'd started recording. I didn't notice it until the next day. My phone clock was normal, but the file says I recorded it later, like something froze it up. Could be a glitch, I suppose. Could be my imagination. But I will tell you, I've hiked those trails for 30 years, and I've never once felt like the woods were aware of me being there. That morning they were. I haven't been back out there. Don't really have the want to. I still drive by the park entrance sometimes, just to look. Curiosity drives me, but I can't make myself stop and go in. I don't know what that thing was, and I don't think it wanted me to. And it definitely didn't want me there because I feel like it was escorting me out of the area. Thank you, Reels. I appreciate your time. JT. Hey there. I've worked seasonally in Glacier National Park on and off since 2016. Maintenance and campground duties mostly. I've seen plenty of wildlife, up close and personal. Bears, wolves, moose, even a mountain lion once near the loop. But something I saw in September of 2020, well, let me tell you about it. We were closing up some of the sites near Lake McDonald before the weather turned. It was just me and one other guy, and we'll call him Randy, splitting duties between fire rings and trash pickup. Most of the tourists were already gone, so we had maybe 10 miles of quiet road and half-empty campgrounds to ourselves. I stayed in one of the small park cabins near the lake. It's a peaceful spot at dusk. Water so still that it mirrors the trees. You can hear everything. Owls, loons. That's why I heard it before I saw it. It was around 10 p.m. and I had a small campfire burning out front. I was cooking a bit of leftover chili. I remember thinking the night was too quiet, like the lake had just sucked up all the sound. Then faintly at first I heard what I thought was someone walking up from the trees. It was heavy steps, with strange spacing. Someone walking very slowly. It unnerved me immediately. I was hoping it was maybe a late hiker that had got turned around, so I did call out, "Are you all right out there?" I got no answer. I kept poking at the fire, waiting for whoever it was to step out. The footsteps stopped, but the feeling didn't. You know that old trick where your body knows it's being watched before your brain even registers it? That's exactly how I felt. I looked towards the tree line and saw two orange-yellow reflections maybe 8 feet off the ground. I didn't know exactly what to think. It's definitely no bear. The spacing was wrong. The eyes were too far apart. Then the light from the fire built up a bit and caught more of it. I saw the outline of something tall, and it seemed to be either deformed in some kind of hunchback, or it was just deliberately slouched forward. It had fur that looked almost gray in the glow, but it was dark, so I can't be sure. It was completely still. I realized it wasn't watching me so much as it was watching the fire. Its head would tilt a little side to side like it was trying to understand it. For a while, I didn't move either. It didn't make a sound aggressive like a growl or anything like that. It did make this slow, steady breathing noise that you only notice when you're close to something that is alive. I thought about reaching for my flashlight, but I ultimately chose not to do that. Not because I was afraid to see it better, it was because I felt like the light would change the situation. Like if I shined the light, whatever was standing there might change its mind about staying put. It stayed like that for maybe a full minute, long enough that my fire started to die down a bit. When the flames dipped, it took a step backward. I didn't hear the twigs or brush break like you would expect from something that big. It was very careful in its steps. Then it just turned and walked off into the dark. When Randy came by in the morning, I told him what I'd seen. He just laughed and said, "You saw a shadow from your own fire." But shadows don't have glowing eyes. Later that day, when we went to dump the ashes from another pit about 50 yards down, there were strange prints near the shore. They weren't full tracks, just indentations in the damp ground. And they were big, spread like a man's steps, not an animal, on 4 legs. I didn't say anything after that. The weird part came a few nights later. Well, the weirder part, as if this isn't weird already. We'd closed up everything. I was packing up my truck and noticed a smell. It smelled like copper or blood. It hit in waves. That winter I worked a short contract in Arizona. But I always think about that Dogman, creature, thing, whatever. How it just stood there, watching the fire like it was seeing something new, like it was mesmerized. Sometimes I wonder if it even knew I was there at all. I've worked around animals long enough to tell when something is hunting and when it's curious. It wasn't looking for food, at least in my opinion. This looked more like intelligent thought, like it was thinking. I don't know. I know how foolish this sounds, but that's what happened. Thanks. Anonymous. Hey, man. First off, I don't know if I even believe half the stories I've heard on your channel, and it's nothing personal. I don't believe other channels that much either. Now, some people, I hear their emails read, and they do sound legit. But I can tell you this much. I believe what happened to me. I'm not a hiker, not a woods guy. I'm from Staunton, Virginia, and my friends talked me into a weekend trip down to Shenandoah a couple summers back. They said it'd be good to get off the grid. I didn't realize that meant sleeping in a tent on the side of a mountain with every bug in the state. It did start out fun, though. There were 4 of us, me, my cousin Brian, and our 2 buddies, Rob and Dallas. We had 2 tents, a cooler full of beer, of course, and just enough food to pretend we were surviving. First night was loud, full of laughter and bad jokes. You could have heard us a half-mile away. Maybe that was our mistake. The second night, everything turned in a different way. It had rained that afternoon. It was a steady drizzle that never fully lets up. We had a fire going, but it smoked more than it burned. Brian had gone down the trail to use the bathroom. He came back looking very disheveled and disturbed. I laughed and said, "What happened? Did a creeper animal stare at you while you were using the restroom?" He said, "No. Someone is out there." Now, there weren't supposed to be any other campers within a few miles. The ranger told us we'd have privacy since we were up by Loft Mountain. I figured he was joking, so I went down there myself with a flashlight. I didn't see anyone, but I did hear something. It was this low chuckle, not like a laugh you'd hear from your buddies. This was low, throaty, like someone trying to stay quiet, just quiet enough where you could barely make out any sounds at all. Like it was intentionally meant to freak you out. And freak me out it did. But I still thought maybe one of the guys was messing with me. I went back to camp and told Brian I didn't see anything, just heard the world's creepiest giggle. We joked about it for a minute, but no one really laughed. Around midnight I woke up because something brushed the outside of my tent. I thought it was the wind until I heard that sound of wet leaves moving and crunching. It was careful steps circling the site. Then, to my horror, that same laugh rang out again. I couldn't move. It came from behind my tent this time, just a quick burst. It was very close, like someone trying to hold it in, but failed. I yelled for Rob and Dallas, but no one answered. I unzipped my tent just enough to see out. The fire was almost completely died out, just burning coals at that point. The rain had stopped, but everything still was dripping wet. Now here's where I saw the movement. It was in the trees, so it was hard to see. It was definitely not a person. It was way too tall. My eyes just felt like they were playing tricks on me, like this wasn't real. Maybe I was dreaming. But this thing was standing upright, and it looked like it was covered in hair like an animal. When it turned its head, the glow of its eyes were yellow, but not like an animal's reflection. This looked like a cigarette in the dark. It was swaying a little, like it was laughing to itself. Then, I swear on a stack of Bibles, I heard it again, that breathy chuckle. Not words, not even a real sound, but enough to make every hair on your body stand up. I stayed inside that tent until daylight. When we got up, Brian said he'd heard someone whistling during the night. I hadn't heard that. Rob said he heard what sounded like 2 sets of footsteps walking around the edge of the camp. I only heard one. He said one was heavy and the other was a bit lighter, like it was something smaller. We all packed up early without speaking too much about it. I didn't tell this part to them, but when I was rolling up my sleeping bag, I found a perfect circle of mud on one side. It looked like something had pressed a wet hand down. There were 4 long, skinny fingers and this short, stumpy thumb that just didn't look right. We hiked out without speaking. By the time we got to the car, it was like nobody wanted to admit anything weird had happened at all. I tried to joke, saying maybe Bigfoot was just looking for a beer. No one was laughing. That was 2 years ago. I don't do camping, especially now. I didn't like it before, but this turned me completely against the woods in general. I live right next to George Washington National Forest, but I don't go in there either. The thing that bothers me the most isn't the sound or even the height. It was that laugh. Because the more I think about it, the more I realize it wasn't laughing at me. It was laughing with me, like it was enjoying the same jokes or conversations that I didn't even know I'd told. Anyway, that's my encounter. Believe it, don't believe it. Doesn't really change my life at all. Doesn't matter to me. But I myself will never forget that laugh, and it's unexplainable to this day. I've thought every scenario through. None of them makes sense. This was real, and it's unforgettable. C.L. Staunton, Virginia. Hi, Reels. I just want to let you know that I thoroughly enjoy your channel and your narrations. Your channel ultimately made me realize how many of us are walking around holding stories in that we don't feel like we can share. Mine isn't about camping or sightseeing. I was part of a volunteer search and rescue effort in Yosemite about 9 years ago. The call came through on a Wednesday morning in late June. Solo, male hiker, 34 years old, missing near the upper section of Yosemite Falls Trail. His girlfriend said he'd gone out early to photograph sunrise from one of the overlooks and had not returned. The first 12 hours of a search are usually routine. Coordinate the grid. Assign teams. Check all the obvious routes. You learn to work in a rhythm. Look, mark, call it in, move on. You also learn not to get emotional. By day 3, we found nothing. No pack, no camera, no prints. The weather was turning. There was some fog rolling in fast from the west. That's when our team lead decided to push one more run up that ridge past Columbia Rock. I remember thinking the air felt thick up there, like the pressure dropped all at once. We split into pairs. My partner, we'll call him Sean, went left toward a narrow chute, and I took the upper ledge line. I was maybe 15 minutes ahead when I saw movement downslope. It was very quick and very silent, like a person darting between trees. I wasn't thinking any cryptid thoughts in my mind. We were looking for a missing hiker. So I radioed Sean and said I might have visual. He asked, "Is it the subject?" I said, "I can't tell, but it's something walking bipedal and it's pretty big, so I assume it's got to be a human." That was when everything went quiet. Not silent in your normal sense of the word. This was some type of oppressive, heavy quiet. It seemed to press against my eardrums and my hearing started to muffle. I crouched down near a log and started watching. I'm guessing 50 to 60 yards away, something came out of the trees and the fog and stood on the ridge below me. At first my brain obviously went to black bear because it was standing up, covered with dark fur, and had a snout and pointed ears. But I immediately realized that's not a bear. It was way too tall and it wasn't built right. This was probably 7 to 8 feet. It had shoulders, wide, almost squared chest. The fur looked uneven, sort of missing patches, like parts of it were wet. The head was the wrong shape as well. It was long, and the ears stuck out to the sides. They weren't rounded like a bear's would be. It was looking uphill, not at me, toward the area where Sean was supposed to be. Then it made this low sound. It was like a hum or a growl someone's trying to keep inside their throat, but involuntarily lets it out. I whispered into the radio, "Sean, stay where you are. There's something between us." He didn't answer right away. Then I heard him say, "I see it." I didn't move, neither did the creature. It just stood there, head tilted slightly to one side like it was listening to both of us. After about 30 seconds, it turned and walked down the slope. It never dropped to all fours. It walked, never touching the trees to balance itself either. The way its back muscles moved under its fur didn't look like any animal I've ever seen. It was closer to human motion, but a lot heavier and more controlled. This was a predator. This thing was a killing machine. We regrouped and called it in as an unidentified subject. The lead said to return to base because of low visibility. That night the fog was thicker, and we had to suspend the search. The next morning a helicopter team spotted the missing hiker's pack about half a mile north of where I'd seen that thing. It was sitting upright against a tree, perfectly placed, not tossed or dropped. His camera was inside, still zipped. The SD card was missing. The official report lists him as unrecovered. His body was never found. I kept quiet for a long time, years, but last fall I went back on my own. I told my wife I was just visiting old friends. I hiked up to the same ridge. The log I hid behind was still there. It was rotted now, covered in moss. But what stopped me cold was a pile of rocks, stacked chest high, maybe 20 yards away. 6 or 7 stones balanced perfectly. I don't know if it was left by another hiker or ranger or something else. I didn't touch it. I just stood there long enough to feel the same air pressure change again. That same heavy, invisible silence. And that was enough to turn me around. I don't think the thing I saw was hunting the missing man. I think it was watching us look for him. And I think it's still up there. Daniel. Hey, Reels. I'm so glad I decided to do this, as I think it will help. I'm not sure if this is supposed to be a confession, closure, or maybe just me talking to a person who won't laugh. My name is, well, not important to this encounter. I'm 63 now, retired from a lifetime of logging and trail work along the Olympic Peninsula. My story happened in 1987. Out near the whole rainforest. This was way long before smartphones and GPS. Back then, if something happened in those woods, it either stayed there or came home in your head. I'd been out marking boundaries for a private timber company. Nothing illegal, just standard survey work near park property. I was alone for about a week, living out of a canvas tent. Rain gear stayed damp. Everything smelled like moss and gas. You get used to that kind of life. The woods become just background noise. By the third night, I noticed the quiet. All I heard was the rain dripping and the occasional branch snapping. It was never close, but never far away either. I believed at the time it was an elk. You would hear them sometimes moving slow through the woods. On the fourth day, around dark, I came across an old overgrown service road that dead-ended at a small clearing. Nothing unusual, except for a feeling that I can't describe here. It's like when you walk into a room and forget why you're there. That flash of disorientation. There was something in that clearing. Not a structure, not a person, just presence. I don't remember hearing it approach, but I looked up and there it was, standing between two trees, at a very short distance away. An unnerving distance, actually, way too close. It was just standing there, half turned like it had been watching me and decided to stop hiding. I would say this thing was 6 to 7 feet in height. Its fur was black with streaks of gray near the chest and on the arms and lower legs. The arms were long, hands almost reaching its knees and shaped like a man. I remember thinking how its fur clumped near the shoulders. It looked like it had a mane, or the hair was just thicker around the upper chest and top of the shoulders and around the back of the neck and head. The most disturbing part were its eyes. They were a dull gold. Now, these weren't glowing, just faintly catching the light. They were actually quite stunning to look at. They didn't look angry. They weren't really curious either. They looked tired. This thing looked either sick or exhausted. We stared at each other for a while. It could have been 10 seconds. It could have been 5. I don't know. Then, as if it decided something, it turned and walked uphill and disappeared into fog. I sat by the tent that night with my headlamp on until it died. I was listening to the rain hit the tarp. Around midnight, I heard a single howl from up the ridge. This wasn't a wolf. I've heard plenty. This started low, rose to a pitch that sounded almost like a voice, then dropped off sharp like it was cut short. I packed up and hiked out early, half convinced that I'd lost my ever-loving mind. Werewolves don't exist, but that's exactly what I saw. A few days later, a coworker radioed that one of the crew found something near that same clearing. There was an elk carcass, untouched except for the head, which had been placed between two stumps. They figured poachers. I figured not. I didn't say a word. I went back there once in 2004. My knees weren't what they used to be, but I made it up that ridge. The clearing's gone now. It's just all ferns and completely grown up. The forest reclaimed it. But when I stood there, the air did not have that same weight to it. That same stillness that presses on your chest was gone. I don't tell people I saw a dogman. I don't even know if that's what it was. I'm just guessing by the way it looked. Maybe it was something that's always been here. Something older than any name we can give it. Whatever they are, this thing did not come after me. It didn't threaten me in any way. It just watched me, and somehow that feels worse to me. It's more unsettling. Some nights, I hear something in the wind that sounds like that howl. It's probably just my imagination or from the trauma of seeing something that's not supposed to be real. I like to think it's just memory echoing back. If maybe that thing is still out there, or just passed through the area and I was unlucky enough to cross its path, I'm pretty sure that that thing was responsible for the elk carcass. And when I said the head was between two stumps, I'm sure you figured out that it had been removed and it looked almost surgical in nature. Normal animals can't do that. They won't do that. There was no point. That was just a senseless killing. It wasn't for food, it was for sport, or to leave a sign for anyone that came back into the area. Maybe it was a warning. Who knows why these things do what they do? They seem to be very confusing, with each report having different behaviors. Anyway, please don't use my name. Forks, Washington. Friends, legends, family. You know, when you stand in one of those forests, Glacier, Shenandoah, Yosemite, or the Olympic Peninsula, I can imagine it's probably a lot like the Daniel Boone here where I live. You realize how small you really are. The wind moves through the trees like a living thing, and every sound carries further than it should. People vanish every year in those same places, and the explanations don't always add up. Search teams comb every square mile, yet some footprints just stop. Some campsites are found untouched. Cameras still in bags, zippers still closed, clothes folded neatly in piles. Maybe the wilderness itself hides them, or maybe something else does. These stories aren't about monsters. They're about the thin line between the known and the unknown, that place where nature stops explaining itself. If you've ever stood in a park at night and felt watched, you're not alone. And if you've ever wondered what's really out there beyond the trails, maybe the answer has been watching you all along. Thank you guys for listening and for keeping these encounters alive. Thank you to the people who sent them in. You have my respect, and I hope I did your stories justice. Everyone, please stay safe out there. I love each and every one of you. Until next time, my friends, watch over your loved ones, keep your head on a swivel, and as always, good night.